Welcome back, everybody. New chapters of dub. This is part 7 of my look at the development of dub through some of the records in my collection. Thanks to everybody that's stuck with me so far. Be sure and check out the previous episodes if you haven't. Today we're looking at the man called Prince Jammy, Lloyd James, at the controls here. Prince Jammy is a very different mixing style than his mentor, King Tubby, the dub master. His mixes are typified by precision, control, absolute mastery of the mixing desk and what it's capable of, as he drops in precision strikes of percussion, other instruments, sweeps of reverb, and sudden cuts, creating tension in the mix. An overall focus on the rhythm, the bass and the drum, first and foremost. And Jammy would become a far more prolific dub mixer than his own mentor as the 70s progressed. By the mid-1970s, dub is expanding into the UK and overseas, where it's discovered by punks, by college students, by audiences far removed from the sound system scene of Kingston, Jamaica, where it was created, as another weapon in the ongoing sound battles, sound clashes, way for one sound to get ahead of another. Dub, just one innovation, but by the late 1970s was beginning to be seen as a bit passé in Jamaica itself, even as it was being discovered by this wider audience internationally. The Jamaican scene is all about what's new, what's the future, with the different sound systems, trying to find something new and different and original to bring to the front as they compete against each other. So dub was maybe seen as something that had been done. There wasn't much that could be done. Also, the most well-known dub mixer, King Tubby, one of the founding fathers of dub, the originator, basically done mixing by the mid-1970s after only a handful of albums that are considered to be authentically mixed by him personally, handed off the reins to his apprentices working in his studio, of which he had many. There was Pat Kelly, there was Philip Smart, but from about 1976 on, his right-hand man would be Lloyd James, Prince Jammy. And you can kind of see that King Tubby's hand is not always on the desk in these mixes, with the increasingly common the ambiguity of King Tubby's here on one of the greatest dub albums of all time, King Tubby Meets Rockers Uptown. King Tubby's. Mixing engineer Errol Thompson and King Tubby's. Very ambiguous plural. That could be referring to Tubby the man. It was not uncommon for him to be called Tubbs or Tubbies when referring to the person, but it could also be used to refer to his studio as a whole, no matter who was personally mixing. And many of the time, it was his apprentices. Increasingly, after the mid-1970s, he lost interest in dub, in mixing dubs personally. Why? It was just one facet of his business. He was also building electronics, building amplifiers, repairing electronics, working on various other aspects of the studio. The biography of him that came out this year, King Tubby's The Dub Master, surmises that as more and more dub albums were released, sometimes using his name without him having any creative input other than one-time mixing fee, which the producers could then take the completed tracks and do whatever they liked with, he wasn't receiving any financial reward from all these albums coming out. And this has continued to this day, with hundreds of dub albums with King Tubby's name in the credits. Despite that, only a small handful of legitimate dub albums are out there that he worked on at the time, prior to largely stepping away from the mixing desk and letting his apprentices take over. Now, from 1976, as I said, his right-hand man was Lloyd James, Prince Jammy. I've talked a lot about King Jammy in some of my digital era reggae videos, but before that, he was Prince Jammy and built up a solid resume of reggae and dub productions. Was heavily focused on dub in these early years of his career, leading up to his dominance in the 1980s when he became one of the most key producers in Jamaican music. He and Tubby had actually known each other for a long time. They grew up in the same neighborhood. Tubby was at 18 Dromilly Avenue, and Lloyd James had been born in Montego Bay, but moved to Kingston as a youngster and grew up at 92 Dromilly Avenue. So they lived very close to each other. They were around each other. They both had these kind of parallel lives where they were interested in electronics, fixing electronics, eventually progressing to building amplifiers. It's all revolving around the sound systems. Both of them had their small sound systems early on in the 1960s. Jammy's had his, Jammy's Hi-Fi, which would play around the neighborhood. Tubby's had his hometown Hi-Fi. So they were both driven by this sound system world, by learning about electronics, especially the mechanics of sound, amplifiers, learning about transformers. It was only a matter of time before they began to move more closely into each other's circle. In the early 1970s, Jammy took some time off from his sound. He went to Canada to follow his girlfriend, Iris, later his wife. Spent a few years there, getting involved in the music scene there. Started up his sound all over again in the Toronto area. He actually wired the studio of Jerry Brown, who is known for the Summer Records productions. Very well-known label in the reggae scene in Canada in the 1970s, Summer Records. Studio largely wired by Jammy himself while he was in Canada. But in the mid-1970s, Jammy returned to Jamaica, initially just for a holiday, I think, and then it turned into a permanent thing as Tubby's had a vacancy in the studio. Philip Smart, the mixing engineer, who was one of Tubby's apprentices, was leaving to emigrate to America. There was a job opening, and soon Jammy was ensconced at Tubby's studio, learning the ropes, learning about all aspects of production, but especially dub mixing, tutored by the king himself, one of the originators of dub. Bunny Lee, the great producer, would also take a hand in mentoring Lloyd James, even gave him his nickname Prince Jammy, because King Tubby was the king, so Jammy had to be the prince. Bunny Lee would give all these guys their nicknames. Jammy soon got involved in producing while he was at Tubby's, going back and forth between studios, mixing dubs at Tubby's. One of his very first productions was Black Uhuru, then a very unknown all-male vocal trio. Finally completed an album with them around 1977 called Love Crisis. Black Uhuru would appear on his own Jammy's label, early Jammy's label. You can see that. Love Crisis. This would later be remixed a few years later as Black Sounds of Freedom. And once Black Uhuru linked up with Sly and Robbie, their career really took off on an international level, but got their start with Jammy. Jammy also produced a lesser-known vocal group, The Travelers. Black Minds was the sole LP they put out. Produced by Jammy, Pressure Sounds reissue from several years ago here. But we're focusing on the dub side of Prince Jammy, which he soon proved to be a master of dub, possibly the equal of Tubby. It's up to the individual to state. Very different mixing styles, as I've said. Black Uhuru, he would dub some of their tracks. First off, around 1977, he put out an LP called Jammy's in Lion Dub Style. I believe that's his first dub LP. I don't have that one. Black Sounds of Freedom LP would spawn Uhuru in dub around the early 1980s. It's a great 2 for CD. Includes the original mixes of Love Crisis, which I was hoping to get the original mix when I picked up this one recently, but I believe it's the same mix as Black Sounds of Freedom, just with the altered track listing. The search continues for the original mix on vinyl. It's the way it goes with reggae on vinyl. Jammy soon became an extremely prolific dub mixer. By the way, Uhuru in dub is also included on this 4 CD box set titled Evolution of Dub, Volume 6. There's a whole series of these 4 CD box sets from VP and Greensleeves Records, all highly recommended if you're into learning about dub. 4 CDs, each presenting an early LP. This one focuses on Jammy. It does have Uhuru in dub, Kamikaze dub, which appeared around 1979 on Trojan Records in the UK, and Osborne in dub, which shockingly is dubs from the singer Johnny Osborne. That appeared in the early 1980s on the CSA label. Slum in dub, sometimes just called Slum, would appear also in around 1978 on the Burning Sounds label in the UK, mixed by Prince Jammy at King Tubby's. This is a reissue from a couple of years ago, very nice pressing here. Dubs largely to Gregory Isaac's Cool Ruler LP, heavyweight dub and heavyweight pressing as well here. Very nice. Crucial dub album mixed by Prince Jammy at King Tubby's, as he increasingly proves to be a master of all elements of production, of dub mixing. Also mixed Horace Andy's In the Light dub for New York-based producer Everton De Silva. These were versions, a full-length dub version. This is a Blood and Fire reissue from 1995. These are full-length dub versions of Horace Andy's crucial In the Light album. Light and dark. I like how they did that with the Blood and Fire releases. Prince Jammy would also mix Hugh Mundel's seminal Africa Must Be Free by 1983 dub. The original produced by Augustus Pablo, old musical acquaintance of King Tubby. He couldn't even persuade King Tubby to come out of retirement to mix these dubs, so Tubby referred him to Jammy. These, of course, are the dubs to Hugh Mundel's essential Africa Must Be Free by 1983, recorded around 1978, and the dub versions Africa Must Be Free by 1983 dub. Straight and to the point, dub mixes. The way Jammy does it. The Augustus Pablo and Everton De Silva connections would probably, most likely, also result in Jammy mixing Chanting Dub with the Help of the Father. Another straight to the point dub mix of Augustus Pablo Productions, appearing on his Rockers International label. No mixer credited, but from the style of the mixing, I would say it is almost certainly Jammy's. In the late 1970s, in the UK, Prince Jammy versus Crucial Bunny, Fat Man Presents Dub Contest would appear in the UK only. These were released through a UK-based producer called Fat Man and pitted half a side of Prince Jammy mixes versus half a side of dubs from another mixer, Crucial Bunny, aka Crucial Bunny Tom Tom, he's sometimes called. Apparently the rock band Tom Tom Club borrows their name from him, one of his nicknames. This included apparently one of Jammy's own personal favorite dubs, Jammy's A Shine, which is a mix of a cover version of Bob Marley's Sun is Shining, as done by Delroy Wilson. Jammy's a No Fool, Jammy's on the Move. Cool song titles on there. Jammy's Dub Contest. Fat Man Dub Contest. 1980, Big Showdown would appear, billed to Scientist, originally billed to Prince Jammy versus Scientist, Dub Showdown. Again, another semi-official Clash LP, where one half of the LP is credited to one mixer, the other half is credited to the other. The listener is supposed to decide who is the winner here. This would herald the arrival of another apprentice of King Tubby's, Hopeton Brown, aka Scientist, as the young upstart dub mixer, also working at King Tubby's. This is a recent reissue. Prince Jammy, partially Prince Jammy mixes, partially Scientist. By 1980, the sound is beginning to change from the roots reggae of the 1970s into the early dancehall sound with a sparser, harder driving rhythm as pioneered by the backing band, the Roots Radics. Jammy's very straight to the point, very disciplined mixes suited these rhythms well, as did Scientists. So Big Showdown would appear in 1980. Classic dub album, which was released on the Greensleeves label. In the early 1980s, as I've said, dub beginning to fall out of favor in Jamaica itself to some extent, was kind of seen as everything had been done with it, but there was still a bit of life left in it. Many of these dub LPs that were appearing in the early 1980s would have only very limited releases, appearing only as white labels, sometimes no covers, no title, no track listing. Some of these have been reissued recently by the great Pressure Sounds label. Strictly Dub appeared only in the US, very limited pressing. Prince Jammy at the mixing desk there. Dubbing in the Front Yard and Conflict Dub. These are Bunny Lee productions dubbed up by Jammy. Conflict Dub, another extremely rare one. Never had any official title until this reissue. Cool shot of Jammy there, looking very stylish. Dubbing in the Backyard, King Tubby's and the Aggravators. This would reportedly mark the end, these recordings would mark the end of Jammy's time with Tubby's, as Jammy became increasingly prolific as a producer with vocals, with the dubs, often while he was supposedly working at Tubby's. Tubby began to take umbrage at some of his increasing workload that was not related to Tubby's, and they finally would part ways in the early 1980s. Some say 1980, some say 1982. They finally split for good. Jammy went on his own, eventually started up his own studio, and would continue his productions right up until he finally broke through in a massive way with that 1985 hit Slang Tang, which heralded the digital reggae revolution. But in the early part of the 1980s, still producing traditionally created vocals and still mixing dubs. Prince Jammy Destroys the Invaders appeared on the Greensleeves label. This is a reissue from a few years ago. The Greensleeves label was putting out these crucial dub albums at the time in the early 1980s, many mixed by Scientist, but some mixed by Jammy, and Jammy is in an uncompromising take no prisoners mood on these mixes. Heavy focus on the drum and bass with some sci-fi inspired synth touches. You can tell by the title and the cover art, Star Wars influence here, and some of the track titles. Martian Encounter, Saturn Bombardment, great sci-fi dub, which would also extend to an album I do not have. Scientist and Jammy Strike Back, another pairing of Scientist and Jammy. Great artwork there. The Roots Radics band, tracks by them being dubbed up. Prince Jammy and King Tubby's versus King Tubby's, showing hinting at the tension between the two men. They would have a complex relationship over the years leading up to Tubby's murder in 1989, but definitely a mutual respect there. These are Jawoosh productions, mixed by Jammy. Appeared on the Sky Juice label, His Majesty's Dub, originally released 1983. In 2011, VP Records put out Crucial in Dub, which is also included on that CD box set, which gives its title, based on a photo by Canadian Beth Lesser. Crucial in Dub, early 1980s mixes by Prince Jammy that were apparently left in the vaults once the digital revolution kicked off, and they were no longer on the cutting edge. Finally released 2011 by VP Records. Crucial in Dub, lost Tubby mix, or Jammy mixes, sorry. So that is my look at Prince Jammy, one of the most prolific dub mixers of the latter half of the 1970s, going into the 1980s. There's many more dub albums he's responsible for. Thanks for everybody who's stuck with me this far. This series has been a great way of getting me looking through my collection, listening to things like Conflict dub that maybe I wouldn't otherwise have pulled out, revisiting things and presenting them in a different fashion, in a way that I could kind of give a perspective and a context to this music for you guys. I'm looking at maybe one more installment of this series to wrap things up. So until then, peace, guys.